They tried to hide these catastrophic mistakes from the history books. Deep inside the archives of human error, researchers found more than just bad decisions and failed experiments. They discovered a terrifying chain reaction of accidental nightmares, so devastating, the original creators completely lost their minds. Join us, and let's discover the top 10 accidental disasters.
Number 10. Australian Rabbit Plague. In the mid-19th century, the massive continent of Australia was a perfectly balanced ecological paradise. But in 1859, an English settler named Thomas Austin felt a bit homesick and missed his weekend hunting trips. Seeking a familiar thrill, he imported just 24 wild European rabbits and released them onto his vast, empty estate. It seemed like an incredibly innocent, harmless weekend hobby. However, Austin was completely blind to a terrifying biological reality. Australia possessed absolutely zero natural predators equipped to hunt this specific foreign species, and the mild winters meant they could breed continuously all year round. To understand this population explosion, imagine dropping a single lit match into a dry paper factory. The acceleration is violently unstoppable. Within a single decade, those 24 innocent pets had aggressively multiplied into hundreds of millions of ravenous animals. They essentially acted like an unstoppable furry plague, violently stripping the continent of its vegetation, causing massive soil erosion, and physically starving native species into total extinction. The Australian government desperately fought back, eventually constructing a massive continent-spanning wire fence just to hold back the endless tide of the animals. Austin's simple desire for a Sunday afternoon hunting trip accidentally unleashed a biological weapon that permanently scarred an entire continent. But releasing animals is nothing compared to cracking open the Earth itself.
Number 9. Darvaza Gas Crater, Turkmenistan. Deep in the heart of the Karakum Desert, Soviet engineers were aggressively hunting for valuable natural resources in 1971. They proudly set up a massive, heavy drilling rig over what they believed was a highly lucrative oil field. But as the heavy iron drills pierced the dirt, the ground beneath their massive camp suddenly completely vanished. They had accidentally punched directly through the roof of a massive, pressurized underground cavern filled entirely with toxic methane gas. The entire drilling camp, complete with highly expensive equipment, violently collapsed into a gaping, poisonous sinkhole. Terrified that the invisible toxic methane would slowly drift outward and suffocate the neighboring desert villages, the engineers made a desperate split-second decision. They threw a lit torch into the massive pit, assuming the trapped gas would safely burn off in just a few weeks. Think of it like turning on your stove to burn off a tiny bit of leaked gas. It should be quick and harmless. But they grossly miscalculated the sheer, incomprehensible volume of the underground reserves. Over 50 years later, that massive blazing crater is still violently burning today. It illuminates the dark desert sky with a terrifying apocalyptic glow, earning the chilling nickname of the Gates of Hell. The Soviets accidentally lit an eternal fire that refuses to die. Yet their next massive engineering mistake involved evaporating water instead of finding oil.
Only 1% of people know the dark truth behind what we are about to show you next. If you want to be part of the few who actually know what's happening in the world, subscribe and leave a like right now. Done? Look at this.
Number 8. Aral Sea Evaporation Disaster. Before the 1960s, the Aral Sea was proudly recognized as the 4th largest inland body of water on the entire planet. Spanning across Central Asia, it was a massive, thriving oasis that fully supported entire fleets of commercial fishing boats and bustling coastal cities. But the Soviet government became absolutely obsessed with transforming the surrounding sterile, dry desert into a massive, highly profitable cotton empire.
To water their new crops, engineers ruthlessly diverted the two massive ancient rivers that fed the Aral Sea. To picture this, imagine taking the main water pipe feeding a giant swimming pool and pointing it onto a hot sidewalk. The pool will inevitably disappear. As the massive rivers were drained away, the giant sea literally began to evaporate under the brutal sun. By the late 1990s, this magnificent, world-famous body of water was almost completely annihilated, leaving behind a terrifying, apocalyptic wasteland. Massive, rusting ghost ships were left helplessly stranded in the middle of a bone-dry desert. Even worse, the exposed seabed was heavily contaminated with decades of toxic agricultural pesticides. When the harsh winds blew, it created massive, poisonous dust storms that choked the surrounding populations, causing explosive spikes in brutal respiratory diseases and lethal cancers. A massive, life-giving sea was entirely erased from the map. But a pharmaceutical giant soon launched an even more deadly consumer product.
Number 7. Thomas Midley, leaded gasoline. To truly comprehend the apocalyptic scale of accidental human destruction, we must examine the terrifying legacy of Thomas Midley, Jr. In the 1920s, this highly ambitious chemical engineer was simply trying to stop early car engines from making a loud, annoying knocking sound. He synthesized a miraculous stabilizing chemical known as tetraethyl lead, and the automotive industry enthusiastically pumped billions of gallons of this fuel into cars worldwide. But Midley aggressively ignored the terrifying reality that his invention was actively blasting a highly toxic neurotoxin directly into the atmosphere. The heavy metal violently attacked the developing prefrontal cortex of millions of children, causing an unprecedented drop in global intelligence, and secretly engineering a massive worldwide epidemic of hyper-violent street crime decades later. But his apocalyptic mistakes did not stop there. Trying to make home refrigerators safer, he invented the world's first commercially viable chlorofluorocarbon. These indestructible chemical molecules silently floated into the stratosphere and violently shattered the Earth's protective ozone layer, ripping open a massive hole above Antarctica that nearly allowed solar radiation to completely sterilize the entire planet. Epidemiological experts estimate that his leaded gasoline alone quietly suffocated over 100 million people through heart disease and cancers. Thomas Midley Jr. accidentally engineered a global massacre so incomprehensibly massive that it secured his dark, undisputed legacy as the single most lethal organism to ever exist on planet Earth.
Number 6. Osborne Reef Tire Disaster. During the massive environmental boom of the 1970s, the state of Florida faced a dual crisis: a massive overflow of old, rotting tires in their landfills, and rapidly dying natural coral reefs off their coast. Seeking a brilliant, eco-friendly solution, a well-meaning organization decided to violently dump over 2 million massive, heavy car tires directly into the ocean off the coast of Fort Lauderdale. The theory was incredibly simple. The tires would sink to the bottom, and new, beautiful marine life would naturally grow over the rubber, creating a massive artificial reef. But the ocean is violently unpredictable. The cheap, heavy steel clips holding the massive tire bundles together quickly corroded in the harsh saltwater. Once the tires broke free, they did not become a beautiful home for fish. Instead, driven by massive hurricanes and strong ocean currents, the 2 million loose tires transformed into an unstoppable underwater demolition derby. Think of it like throwing millions of heavy bowling balls onto a fragile glass floor during a massive earthquake. The heavy, toxic rubber violently crashed into the actual natural coral reefs, completely pulverizing the fragile ecosystems they were meant to protect. Decades later, military divers are still desperately trying to pull the toxic rubber out of the water, while a foreign insect invasion triggered an entirely different kind of panic.
Number 5. Africanized killer bees escape. In 1956, a highly ambitious biologist, wanted to drastically boost massive honey production in the Western Hemisphere. He knew that native European bees were incredibly sluggish in tropical heat, so he traveled to Africa and imported dozens of highly aggressive, highly productive African honeybee queens. He carefully secured them in a tightly controlled laboratory, placing specialized tiny metal grids over the hives. These heavy grids allowed the tiny worker bees to pass through, but successfully trapped the massive, dangerous queen bees inside. However, an unsuspecting substitute beekeeper completely misunderstood the heavy metal safety measures and quickly removed the grids. 26 massive swarms of these hyper-aggressive bees instantly escaped the facility, violently bursting out into the jungle. They immediately began mating with the local European bees, creating a terrifying, highly volatile hybrid species. These new insects are relentlessly territorial. If you simply step within 50 feet of their hive, they will aggressively chase you for over a quarter of a mile in massive swarming clouds. It is like triggering a biological landmine that refuses to stop hunting you. These escaped insects rapidly invaded 2 entire continents, accidentally killing hundreds of innocent people and permanently altering the local ecosystem. Yet, an entire species of birds was wiped out by a much smaller animal.
Number 4. Stevens Island wren extinction. In the late 1890s, a beautifully isolated piece of land known as Stevens Island sat quietly off the coast of New Zealand. To help guide passing ships, the government constructed a massive lighthouse on the rocky shore, and a single man was assigned to operate it. Because the remote island was completely devoid of humans, the keeper brought along his beloved pet cat named Tibbles for simple companionship. At the time, the island was home to an incredibly rare, flightless bird known as the Stevens Island wren. Because these tiny birds had evolved in an environment with absolutely zero natural predators, they had completely lost the ability to fly and walked harmlessly on the dirt. Introducing Tibbles into this fragile ecosystem was like dropping a highly trained military assassin into a room full of sleeping toddlers. The cat and her newly born kittens aggressively hunted the defenseless birds every single night. Within just a few short months, the cats had completely and violently annihilated every single wren on the entire island. It remains the only documented case in biological history where a single pet effectively triggered the complete and absolute extinction of an entire species. But a much larger animal disaster happened in Asia.
Number 3. Chinese Four Pests campaign. In 1958, the Chinese government launched an aggressive, massive public health initiative to completely eliminate diseases and radically boost agricultural production. They ruthlessly targeted 4 specific animals: rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows. The government claimed that the tiny sparrows were aggressively stealing the grain seeds meant for the people, so they ordered the entire country to violently eradicate them. Millions of citizens aggressively banged loud pots and pans in the streets for days, violently terrifying the birds until they literally dropped dead from massive physical exhaustion. Hundreds of millions of sparrows were brutally wiped out in a matter of months. But the government violently misunderstood how food chains work. The sparrows didn't just eat seeds, their primary food source was actual insects. Without the birds to hunt them, the locust population violently exploded into the trillions. Imagine removing the security guards from a bank. The robbers will immediately empty the vault. The massive, unstoppable swarms of locusts aggressively blanketed the sky, violently devouring every single crop across the vast Chinese countryside. This catastrophic biological mistake directly triggered a brutal, horrifying starvation event that tragically killed between 15 and 45 million innocent human beings. But another industrial mistake almost swallowed a city.
Number 2.
Lake Peigneur sinkhole disaster. In the deep swamps of Louisiana, a beautifully calm, freshwater body of water known as Lake Peigneur sat quietly above a massive, highly profitable underground salt mine. In November of 1980, a massive oil rig was carelessly drilling directly into the bottom of the shallow lake, desperately searching for crude oil. Due to a highly complex, absolutely fatal mapping error, their massive iron drill accidentally pierced directly through the thick rock ceiling of the active salt mine directly below. Almost instantly, the fresh water from the lake violently rushed into the tiny hole, aggressively dissolving the salt and widening the gap. It created an apocalyptic, highly violent whirlpool that sucked the massive multi-million-dollar oil rig completely underwater. The destructive suction was so incredibly powerful that it violently reversed the massive flow of a nearby canal, dragging entire commercial barges directly into the massive crater. To visualize this, imagine pulling the tiny drain plug in your bathtub, but the water violently rips the entire bathroom down into the pipes. In a matter of hours, an entire freshwater lake violently drained into the earth, permanently transforming into a massive, deep saltwater crater. Amazingly, the terrified miner—
Number 1. Bayer heroin cough syrup. In the late 19th century, medical professionals were fiercely battling a massive public health crisis involving morphine addiction. The powerful painkiller was highly effective but notoriously dangerous, turning countless patients into desperate addicts. Hoping to corner the medical market, scientists at the massive German pharmaceutical company Bayer synthesized a brand new, highly complex chemical compound in 1898. They proudly marketed it as a totally safe, non-addictive, and highly effective substitute for morphine. They aggressively branded this miracle drug under a catchy, heroic-sounding name. The chemical was immediately shipped to pharmacies worldwide. But the most chilling aspect of their marketing campaign was the target audience. Bayer aggressively advertised liquid heroin as a completely harmless, soothing cough suppressant, specifically designed for small, sick children. Imagine trying to cure a toddler's simple winter cold by giving them a spoonful of the most notoriously destructive street drug in modern history. Doctors blindly prescribed the sweet chemical syrup to families across the globe. By the time the medical community finally realized the drug rapidly and violently metabolized into pure morphine inside the human body, they had already accidentally triggered the world's very first global opioid epidemic. Bayer eventually pulled the lethal product, but a completely different ecological disaster was quietly brewing in the ocean.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.